Hi, and welcome to Lectionary Laxative, where we offer some brief insights into the lectionary text on a given Sunday and try to keep you preachers and lay people from getting blocked up so that your spirit and inspiration can flow. I'm Bruce Seaman, a recently retired Presbyterian Church USA minister who has worked the lectionary text for a long time through many cycles. You figure out the sermon, I'll share what I see and help you get inspirational things moving. Let's get started. Well, Lent is now being served on this first Sunday of Lent. Sin? Yes. Repentance? Yes. Cleansing and renewing water? Yes. Problems? Yes. Those problems that I'm talking about are covered in two brief pieces which I'm calling lectionary laxatives: heretical hernia. Since I don't want anyone to be afflicted with these commentaries, which can cause a rupture in your orthodoxy, I won't post them until Sunday afternoon. So watch for them. Or better, make sure you hit that red subscribe button before you go so that you get notified. All right, so this week we have God establishing a covenant with Noah in Genesis 9. And this covenant recapitulates what was said in the first creation story to be fruitful and multiply. Indeed, this is a new creation since the former creation was destroyed by the flood due to violence and corruption, making God rue the day he had made humans. The covenant is announced when Noah is instructed to build the ark, and it's fulfilled today in our selection as they have now emerged from the ark. God's goodwill for humanity has abided, even though God wiped out most all of them with the flood. We see God's gracious goodness in this new creation, a restoration of blessings for all who inhabit the creation. It can be paradise if humans want it to be paradise. Great themes pervade this familiar text without even touching on the pretty rainbow, the multicolored heavenly bridge between heaven and the creation. So we've got God's ultimate grace in preserving a remnant. We have God's providence in restoring the blessings of creation. We have God's willingness to make a covenant with his creatures, an exceptional act in itself, something no other God would do. And God's desire to see life, new life, flourish amid the still sinful nature of humans. So that's some juicy stuff to run with and to wrap around one of the Lenten themes. In the gospel account from the beginning of Mark, we've already been introduced to John the Baptist. We proceed to Jesus coming before John to be baptized. And coming up out of the water, the Spirit descends like a dove. Note, not a real bird. Jesus gets acknowledged by the voice from heaven, presumably God, naming Jesus as Son, as beloved, as pleasing. And then in one quick sentence, Mark tells about Jesus' temptation in the wilderness by Satan and with wild animals and attendant angels. All right, well, baptism is the obvious theme here, a good time to talk about baptism in your tradition if you haven't done so in a while. We had a bunch of John the Baptist texts in January. Maybe you've already done it. These things in your tradition, they likely include repentance, forgiveness of sin, embracing a new life path, all of which tie into Lenten rededication, reorientation of spirituality, strengthening the relationship with God, and reviewing your priorities in the light of the gospel and Jesus' teachings about the kingdom, and more, which I'm sure you can think of on your own. So just pick one and work it. The Noah selection and this terse Markan Baptist account provide plenty of angles and directions, but make sure you just pick one, okay? One. Do just one really well. Don't pay attention to the 3-point sermon nonsense. More than one theme, it just wastes a different message by mixing it up with another theme, confusing, and diluting the perfectly good, focused message you could have given. So pick one and go with it. Okay, let's do the Psalm and the Epistle. Psalm 25 opens with trust in God and then gravitates to hope in God and never being shamed. Because shame comes to those who are treacherous without cause. This might lead one to believe that treachery with a cause could be okay, but let's write that off to poetic license or NIV translator foible. Okay. The better, meatier portion for Lent starts in verse 4. The psalmist pleads to be taught and shown the ways of truth. Verse 7 makes a second plea, not to remember the sins of my youth. Again, if you look too closely, you see or hear what is not necessarily intended. I mean, hey, psalmist, do you lack sins as an adult? Yeah, sins of youth are different from sins as adult, but still, psalmist, you may want to cover your adult sins too, just in case. Verse 8 begins affirmations of the goodness and righteousness of God, who instructs sinners rather than simply condemning sinners, and guiding those who humble themselves, leading them back into the covenant's promise. And for some reason, verse 11 is cut off from the selection, but I'd argue for including it because here we have adult psalmist pleading forgiveness for my iniquity, though it is great. Well, that's better. The omission may have been to avoid one of those heretical hernia traps that I will be talking about on Sunday. Beware of that trap if you do. Let's go to the text from 1 Peter. But, it is a wide-ranging, murky text that I would avoid like the plague. It recounts kind of the Noah episode, hence its inclusion in the selections, but it is heavily jargoned with theological apologetics, tying together Noah and water with baptism and resurrection. Good Lord. For those who want to confuse the congregation and appear like, I know theology and you don't, listen to me bloviate, then by all means choose this mess of a text. Good luck, but no one is going to thank you or be impressed that you chose this text. Okay, so there is no lack of directions to pursue, but Lent is going to keep you occupied for a bunch more weeks. Even though you have a baptism text, you may have exhausted the baptism angle from the January texts. Been there, done that. So ask yourself, how do we want to start off the Lenten season? And I'd hope that you might emphasize the positive to make the period of Lenten reflection and recommitment and spiritual growth into the focus of the season. So there's the grace of God who seeks to bring us to new life, to restore life's promise with the faithful. Despite how crappy we may be at keeping our end of the covenant, God's grace continues to reach out to us, willing to renew the covenant with those who truly seek God's righteousness. There's the providence of God, which is another angle on renewal, providing for a new and abundant creation, as well as strength, support, and encouragement for the wilderness journey and its trials and temptations. Yeah, you can go there. So there's a nice variety of directions and emphases for you this week. Stay serious, but lift your people up. And as always, go and kick some ass for Jesus.